The morning fog clung to the hills, shrouding the estate in a thick, eerie silence. Ethan Blackwood, one of the wealthiest men in the country, stood before his mother's grave, the heavy stone monument marking her final resting place. The loss had torn him apart, even though it had been years since her passing. His mother had been everything to him, his only family, his guide, and his pillar. Yet today the grave felt emptier than it ever had before. As he stood there, lost in thought, the only sounds were the distant birds and the rustle of leaves. But something was different this time. A strange tug at his chest pulled him back to the present moment. As his eyes scanned the edge of the graveyard, something caught his attention. Two small figures standing in the distance. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, but then they stepped closer, revealing two little girls, no older than 7 or 8, walking with slow, deliberate steps toward him. Their clothes were ragged, worn from the elements, but they walked with an almost purposeful grace, like they belonged here, in this place. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He could sense that something was wrong, something deeper than the children's appearance. It was almost as if the very earth around them was connected, as though they were part of the fabric of this place, this very graveyard. He stepped forward, hesitant at first, unsure whether he should approach them. His mother had always told him that there were signs in life, that everything had a purpose, even the smallest events. But what were these two children doing here, alone, in a graveyard? "Are you lost?" Ethan called out, his voice more concerned than he had intended. The girls didn't answer right away. They simply looked at him, their faces unreadable, yet filled with something ancient, something he couldn't quite grasp. Their eyes were wide and full of knowledge, a kind of wisdom beyond their years. Finally, one of the girls spoke, her voice soft, like the whisper of a breeze. "Are you the one who loved her?" Ethan's heart clenched at the question. His mother, the woman who had raised him, guided him, and loved him despite the circumstances of their past. He had never stopped loving her, even after she was gone. It felt like the earth itself had cracked open with the weight of the question, but the girl's gaze held him in place. "Yes, I loved her. She was everything to me," Ethan replied, his voice trembling slightly, though he tried to keep himself composed. The little girls nodded as if his answer was somehow expected, and then they exchanged a glance with each other, as if they were communicating in some unspoken language. After a long pause, the other girl, whose face seemed filled with both sadness and a quiet resolve, spoke again, her words carrying a weight that made Ethan's stomach drop. "We know. We knew her." Ethan felt a sharp pang in his chest. His heart seemed to stop for a moment. How could they know his mother? Who were these children? They were dressed like orphans, but their words had the weight of people who had known deep loss themselves. He took a cautious step closer. "Who are you? Where are your parents?" His voice shook now, both out of concern and a growing sense of unease. The girls looked up at him, their faces strangely serene, as if they were at peace with the world around them. The first girl spoke once again, her voice soft but carrying the weight of an old secret. "We are not supposed to be here, but she called us. She needs you to know something, something you never knew." Ethan's heart pounded. Who were these children? And what did they know about his mother? Before he could ask any more questions, the second girl reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. She handed it to him, and as he looked at the picture, his breath caught in his throat. It was an old photo, a photograph of his mother, but she was standing with two children. His mother's face was as familiar as his own, but these children, these were not familiar faces. One of them was a little girl holding a stuffed animal, while the other appeared to be looking directly at the camera. It was a photo he had never seen before. "This is us. We were with her. We were supposed to stay together, but now we need you." The first girl's voice was now steady and serious, like she was passing on a heavy burden, one that seemed too great for someone so small. Ethan could barely breathe, the world around him growing hazy. He had never seen this photograph. Who were these children, and how were they connected to his mother? He hadn't heard anything about them growing up. His mother had always been private, but this was something he couldn't ignore. His pulse quickened as he held the photograph, unable to make sense of what was happening. His mind raced, but the only thing that made sense in the moment was the strange certainty in their eyes. Ethan stood there, staring at the photograph in his hands, his mind racing. The image of his mother, younger, standing next to two children he had never seen before, was like a punch to the gut. He had spent so many years wondering about his mother's past, about the things she had never told him. But this was something beyond his understanding. The children in the photo, the same children standing before him, had been with his mother, yet he had never known about them. How was that possible? Why had his mother kept them hidden from him? The silence stretched between them as the two girls watched him intently, waiting. Their presence, once unsettling, now felt almost familiar, like an integral part of something that was just out of reach, something he had yet to fully comprehend. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you? How do you know her?" His hands tightened around the photograph, his fingers trembling slightly. "Why didn't she tell me about you? Why didn't I ever know?" The first girl stepped forward, her eyes filled with something deeper, an ancient sorrow perhaps, something that spoke to him beyond mere words. "She couldn't tell you." Her voice was calm, yet carried an unsettling weight. "You weren't ready to know." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Not ready to know? What could that possibly mean? How could he not have been ready to know about these children? His siblings, perhaps, if the photograph was to be believed. "But I'm her son. I should have known." Ethan's voice cracked with frustration. "I spent years with her, and she never said a word. I deserve to know the truth." The second girl, who had been silent up until now, spoke softly, her tone almost mournful. "The truth is too heavy for anyone to carry. Not even you." She glanced at the first girl and then back at Ethan. "There are things that need to stay hidden, secrets that must never be uncovered, until the time is right." The words sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. Secrets? What secrets? Why had his mother felt the need to keep this part of her life hidden? What had happened to these children, these orphans, that they now stood at his mother's grave, looking as though they belonged there? Suddenly, a sense of urgency filled the air, like something was pressing against him, urging him to understand. His mind scrambled for answers, but none seemed to make sense. "What happened to you? Why are you here now?" he asked, feeling both desperate and confused. The first girl looked at him with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of sorrow. "We were taken away, separated. She tried to protect us, but in the end, it wasn't enough." Her voice faltered for a moment, the weight of the past settling heavily on her words. "You need to listen to us. She had to make a choice, and you need to make one now too." Ethan's heart thudded in his chest. A choice? What choice? His thoughts spiraled as the girl's words began to settle in his mind. Separation? Protection? He couldn't understand how this all connected. Why hadn't his mother ever told him about her past, about these children who seemed so important? The pieces of the puzzle were all there, but they refused to fit together. The second girl stepped forward now, her expression somber. "She wanted to keep us safe. She kept us away from you so that you could live a life free of the past. But now that she's gone, we need you to find us. Find us before they do." Ethan was confused. "Find you? What do you mean? Who's after you?" The first girl stepped back, and in that moment, the atmosphere around them seemed to change. The graveyard grew colder, the fog swirling more intensely around them. The sunlight, once warm, now seemed muted and distant. The girl looked up at him, her eyes serious. "The ones who took us away, they are still out there." Ethan's heart raced. The dark past his mother had tried to shield him from was coming into focus, and it was more terrifying than he could have ever imagined. Who were these children? Why had they been taken away? And what did they mean by, "they are still out there"? Before he could ask another question, the first girl spoke again. "The time has come for the truth to be known." She paused, her gaze unwavering. "You must make your choice. Will you help us, or will the past remain buried forever?" Ethan stood frozen, his mind spinning, the weight of her words pressing down on him. The secret of his mother's life, the truth about the orphan twins, and the threat that still lingered in the shadows. All of it had suddenly become his responsibility. The choice he had been asked to make would define everything. Ethan's head spun, the weight of the situation bearing down on him. His mother's grave, the orphan twins, the mysterious photo, all of it tangled together like a web of forgotten secrets, pulling him deeper into something much darker than he had ever imagined. The girl's words echoed in his mind. You must make your choice. But what choice? What was his role in all of this? He felt like he was standing at the edge of an abyss, staring into the unknown. He turned to face the two girls, their faces filled with a strange mixture of urgency and sorrow. His heart pounded as he tried to process everything that had just happened. Who took you away? He asked, his voice shaking slightly. The question seemed to hang in the air like a dark cloud. The first girl glanced at the second, her expression turning more serious. They were part of something bigger, a group that wanted us to forget. They erased everything, our past, our connection to her. Her voice cracked slightly, the weight of her words almost too much to bear. But we remember now. We have to find the answers before they come for us again. Ethan felt a chill spread across his chest as he realized how deep this went. This wasn't just a family secret. It was something far more dangerous, something that had been hidden from him for a reason. Who were these people? Why had his mother kept her past so tightly sealed? What happened to her? Why didn't she tell me about you? Why didn't she ever mention you? Ethan's voice was thick with frustration. He was angry. Angry at his mother for keeping this from him. Angry at the unknown figures who had taken the twins away. And angry at himself for not asking these questions sooner. The second girl, the quieter one, spoke this time, her voice softer but filled with the same weight. She protected you. She didn't want you to be part of this world, part of the danger that followed us. She hesitated, as if unsure how much she should reveal. She knew it was safer for you to grow up without knowing the truth. Ethan's mind raced. Danger? What danger? And why hadn't his mother trusted him enough to tell him? His emotions were a tangled mess of confusion, betrayal, and fear. He had always thought his mother's life was simple, that she had only wanted the best for him. But now it seemed there were layers to her story that he could never have imagined. We need your help. The first girl's words snapped him back to the present. She stepped closer, her eyes imploring him. We need to know where she hid the answers. We don't have much time. Ethan looked at the girls, the reality of the situation sinking in. They were asking him to help them uncover something buried deep in his mother's past, something that could be far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. He didn't know what they were talking about or what they had been through. But one thing was clear. His mother had been hiding something, something that had cost her more than he could comprehend. Where do we start? Ethan's voice was steady now, his resolve hardening. He couldn't ignore this. These children, the twins, were connected to his mother in a way he didn't understand, and it was clear they needed his help. If his mother had truly wanted to protect him from something dangerous, then maybe it was his turn to protect her memory, to uncover the truth she had hidden away. The second girl handed him the photograph again, this time more gently. This is where it begins, she said, her voice quiet. Find the place where she hid the key. It's the only way to stop what's coming. Ethan looked down at the photograph once more. The image of his mother with the two twins, standing together in a field of tall grass, a place he couldn't quite recognize. The picture was old, faded, but there was something in the background that looked like an old house, one he had never seen before. A small cottage barely visible through the trees, its outline almost hidden behind thick, overgrown vines. He stared at it, something stirring deep within him. This house, he had never seen it in any of his mother's old photos or stories, but now staring at it, he felt a strange pull, like it held the key to everything. He turned to the girls, determination in his eyes. We need to go there. The first girl nodded solemnly. It's the only place left where the answers lie. With a new sense of purpose, Ethan set his jaw and looked at the overgrown path that led deeper into the graveyard, the direction where the old house might be. There was no going back now. He had been pulled into something far bigger than he could have imagined, and there was no way out except to find the answers. The only thing he knew for sure was that whatever lay ahead, it was going to change everything. Ethan's footsteps echoed in the cold, foggy air as he walked alongside the two twins, their small figures moving with purpose. The photograph of his mother, still clutched tightly in his hand, burned a hole in his thoughts. The house in the background, hidden in the shadows of the trees, was starting to feel like the only thing that mattered. The twins were eerily quiet, as if they were guiding him towards something they already knew. A path had been set, and he had no choice but to follow. "Do you remember anything about the house?" Ethan asked, his voice strained as they moved through the thickening fog. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of the cryptic messages they had shared with him. Answers. He needed answers. Why had his mother hidden this place from him? Why had she chosen to leave so much unsaid? The first girl, who had spoken the most, looked up at him with those deep, knowing eyes. It's where everything started. It's where she was safe, but she couldn't keep it that way forever. Ethan's heart began to pound harder. The weight of her words sent a shiver down his spine. What could she mean by safe? What happened there that his mother had felt the need to keep him away from? As they approached the edge of the graveyard, the trees grew denser. The fog clung to the trunks, twisting the landscape into something unfamiliar, almost dreamlike. It was as if they were stepping into another world, one that held secrets buried deep. Ethan's breath became visible, a pale mist in the air, as the chill sank deeper into his bones. The house was now just a shadow through the trees, barely visible. It was as if the world around it had long since abandoned it. Yet there was something undeniable about the way it seemed to call out to him, beckoning him toward its decay. "We're close now," the second girl said quietly. She had barely spoken since they started walking, but her words were calm and sure. There was no fear in her voice, only a quiet certainty. Ethan glanced at the house ahead, feeling the oddest sense of foreboding creeping up his spine. The house was small, with a dark, weathered roof and crumbling stone walls. The windows were boarded up, the wood long since rotted away, leaving only gaping holes. It looked like a place that had been abandoned for years, if not decades. It was hardly a home anymore. It was more like a relic of the past, frozen in time. But it felt more than that. Something about it felt alive, as though it held the echoes of things long forgotten. What had happened here? "Is this the place?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper as he stared at the house. He could feel the answer in his gut. Yes, this was the place. But how could he be sure? The first girl nodded slowly, her expression serious. "This is where she hid the truth." Her words sent a cold rush of unease through Ethan. And where it all started to go wrong. They stopped just outside the house, the ground beneath their feet covered in a blanket of wet leaves. Ethan's heart raced in his chest. He didn't know what to expect, but his gut told him the house was the key to everything. The truth about his mother, the twins, the dark secrets that had been buried for so long. The door was ajar, creaking on its hinges as though it had been waiting for someone to open it, waiting for him to step inside. The smell of mildew and dust hit him immediately, a stale, musty air that seemed to cling to everything. The past was thick in here, suffocating, waiting to be uncovered. Ethan pushed the door open, the ancient wood groaning under his weight. He stepped inside, the dim light from outside casting weak shadows over the room. It was empty, save for a few old, rotting pieces of furniture and the remnants of forgotten memories. Yet there was something unnerving about the emptiness, as if the house was watching him. The second girl stepped inside after him, her footsteps light, almost silent. The first girl followed, but she didn't speak. The silence was oppressive, as if the house itself were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Ethan moved cautiously, scanning the room. Nothing made sense. The walls were lined with old photographs and dusty trinkets, but it was hard to focus on them. His eyes kept being drawn to a small wooden chest sitting in the corner. It was simple, nothing fancy, yet it seemed to have a certain presence, as if it were the heart of this place. He approached it slowly, his fingers trembling as he reached for the latch. His breath was shallow, his chest tight with anticipation. He could feel the weight of what was about to happen. His mother had kept something locked away for so long, and now it was time for the truth to be revealed. The latch clicked open with a soft snap, and Ethan lifted the lid, his heart racing in his chest. Inside the chest, there was a stack of letters, tied with a faded ribbon. Each letter was sealed with wax, old and brittle, the writing on the envelope so faint it was hard to read. "This is it," the first girl whispered behind him, her voice full of reverence. "This is what she wanted you to find." Ethan lifted the first letter, his hands shaking. As he broke the seal and unfolded the fragile paper inside, the room seemed to hold its breath. Whatever was written here would change everything. But what he read next left him speechless. Ethan's hands shook as he unfolded the first letter, the paper fragile and worn from years of neglect. The faint scent of old ink and dust filled the air as he began to read. The words on the page were written in a hand he recognized, his mother's handwriting, but the content was shocking. His breath hitched as he tried to absorb the truth in front of him. "To my dearest Ethan," the letter began, and just reading those words made his chest tighten. "I've kept so much from you. Things I never wanted you to know. Things that were better left buried." The letter went on, telling of a secret past Ethan never knew existed. His mother had been involved in something dangerous long before she had taken him in. A secret organization, one that had been trying to track down children with special abilities. Children like the twins. His mother, protective as always, had hidden the twins away, fearing for their safety and for his. "I had no choice, Ethan." The words seemed to burn into his mind as he read aloud, his voice a mere whisper in the cold, dark room. "I had to make sure they were safe. You were too young, too innocent. You never should have known. But now I must tell you everything before it's too late." The letter continued, explaining that the twins who stood in front of him now had once been part of his mother's life, her past, a past full of secrets and danger. They had been torn from her at a young age, separated by those who wished to exploit their abilities. She had spent years protecting them from a world that wanted to use them for its own gain, hiding them away from everyone, even her own son. But the most chilling part came next. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here to protect you." His mother's words felt like a warning, echoing in the air as though she was right there with him. "They are coming for you. They know you are connected to them. The curse that has followed the twins, the curse they carry, it's now yours too. If you don't act quickly, you will lose everything." Ethan felt his heart drop. What curse? What had his mother been talking about? He had never heard of anything like this, but he had always known there was more to his mother than met the eye. She had never spoken of her past, and now it was clear why. "You must take the twins, and you must find the place where it all began, the place where it started. The key is hidden there, and when you find it, you'll understand everything." The letter ended there, and Ethan stood in the middle of the room, holding the fragile parchment in his hands. The weight of his mother's words pressed down on him like a ton of bricks. He had to find the key, but what was it? What did it unlock? And how was it connected to the twins standing before him, the children he never knew? He turned to look at them, the twins who had been standing silently throughout the entire ordeal. Their eyes were full of sorrow and understanding, as though they had known this moment would come. They hadn't spoken a word since the letter was revealed, but now the first girl spoke. "It's not just the key to the past," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of a lifetime of pain. "It's the key to stopping everything from falling apart. If you don't find it, everything will be lost." The second girl nodded, her face grim. "We were meant to be together. We were supposed to protect you, but we couldn't. We couldn't stop what's coming." Ethan swallowed hard, looking from the letter to the twins. His mother had protected him from this world for so long, but now everything was changing. He had to protect them now, just as his mother had done for him all those years. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. The truth was out, and there was no going back now. The curse, the secrets, the family he never knew. It all came crashing into his life with a force he could not deny. "We need to find the key," Ethan said, his voice resolute. "We need to finish what my mother started. We need to protect you both." With that, he turned toward the door of the house, the weight of what lay ahead pressing on him. There was no more time to waste. The twins had already waited too long, and so had he. Whatever was coming was not just about them, it was about his mother's legacy and the future of everything they held dear. As they stepped out into the cold air of the graveyard, the fog had lifted slightly, but the darkness still loomed. The past had come alive, and now it was up to Ethan to set things right before it was too late.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.